What we do here is go back.
Hello there, everybody. You join me on a somber occasion. The story you see on the screen here is the death of a human being. And I think we need to bear that in mind, okay? I know a lot of people won't necessarily feel a lot of sympathy for this ban. And that's understandable. But what I will just say is that we here on the left, the tolerant left, TM, believe that all life is sacrosanct and therefore sharpen that. A top neo-Nazi has fallen 200 feet to his death whilst hiking Hitler's favourite mountain. Andreas M. was a treasurer and assessor for the regional association of the far-right extremist party, the Third Way, and was killed when he fell down Hitler's favourite mountain. Now, some people will say that is demonstrably fucking hilarious and actually a righteous way for this piece of shit to end. And I will say that I disagree with that. Fundamentally, and because of my values as a humanoid. And so I request of you, dear viewer, a moment's silence to respect the passing of a human. Don't want to get copyrighted. Can we get some F's in chat? I am a grown adult. I am, I promise. I've got one eye. That one. How are we all? Are we well? God, I'm going to take this shit off. It's fucking sweaty. God damn. Is it the devil? I might be. How are we all? Are we well? Dead Nazis is always a good start to the show. Turn the fucking fan on, man. Sweating my cock off here. How are we all? Are we well? I'd certainly hope so. After a banging opening like that, I would hope that everyone is in fine fettle. God dang it. We're off to a flyer. We're off to a fucking flyer, everyone. So, nice fish suit. That is not a fish suit, that is a fucking lobster. Or a crab or something. You put some respect on its name. Or something, I don't know. Thank you, Luna Rose, by the way, for gifting 5 subs before we get going. Much fucking love to you. Absolutely beautiful activity. Huzzah. If Harris loses the election, I'm blaming Ashworth. I'm blaming Ashworth anyway. I don't give a fuck. Fuck him. He needs to fuck off already. He needs to have already fucked off. He should, Michael. He should stop it and get some help. Yes. Thank you, Dell59, for resubscribing. 44 months with Prime. Much love to you. Don't forget, everybody, if you wanted to help out the stream, you can hit the follow button. You can subscribe. You can subscribe with Amazon Prime. I should have done this in the fucking lobster suit, shouldn't I? That would have been a seller. People would have loved that shit. Although I would have sweated to death, I think. So, swings and roundabouts. Anyway, yes, you can become a member. You can become a member over at, you can become a member with the fucking hell, Prime, Amazon Prime. That's what you can do. You can give memberships to the community. You can do super chats messages, 200 bits or more gets you a text to speech. You can do super chats messages via the Streamlabs link below. If you're on Twitch, $2 or more there gets you a text to speech. I've got Patreon, PayPal, Discord, Blue Sky, TikTok, Instagram, Facebook, Threads is also a thing. Yeah. Anyway, if you're on YouTube, hello YouTubers, you can subscribe to me for free. You can thumb the video up, always good. You can become a member for 99 pence. It's nothing. Well, it's not literally nothing, it's 99 pence, more than nothing. But you get the idea. You can give memberships to the community. Or you can do super chats, which I will read out, especially if they're phenomenally rude. Was it one of our Nazis or American? No, it was an American. Sorry, no, it was a German Nazi. Yeah, very much so. What's this? John Ashworth leads Labour delegation giving campaign tips. Why would you want campaign tips from a guy who just lost? Can John Ashcroft fuck off? I mean, to be fair, he has fucked off to America, so that's good. Maybe we'll see slightly less of him now. That would be nice. Anyway. I wanted to do a little bit of a Tankie Tuesday. But obviously it's not Tuesday. Which means obviously I should do it then. Because why would you do a Tankie Tuesday on a Tuesday? That would be fucking insane, Kevin Logan. You'd be mad. So we're going to do that. I forgot where we're up to in Soviet Storm though, so we'll have to sort of wing it and see. I don't know where the fuck we're... It's been like 2 months since I did one of these, so I don't know where we were. It sort of doesn't matter, but it sort of does. I did hear that Alex Salmon died today. Yeah, noted transphobe. I'm not getting the fucking suit back on, but I could have done a crab dance for that. Alex Salmon died at the age of 69. Nice. In North Macedonia, because of course that's where he was. Why wouldn't he have been? You're a fool unto yourself if you thought he was going to be anywhere else. If you thought he was going to be in Strathclyde or fucking, I don't know, Aberdeen or some shit. No. He was in Skopje, giving a speech there in English, presumably. Okay, cool. Yeah, he died. So one fewer transphobe in the world. Cool. Good stuff. Anyway. So in terms of Tankie nonsense, I've got a couple of things for you. One is a partial kind of a thing, and then one is a much longer one, which we'll try and get through most of if we can, but we'll see.
Ladies and gentlemen, we got him.
Thank you, Shadow Man, for following. Welcome to the Kevolution, friend. Didn't we go up to Stalingrad? Possibly, Luna. We'll see. We'll have to play it by ear when we get there. The first of the things is by Jason Unruh. Jason Unruh is a Canadian Marxist-Leninist who's gone by the moniker Maoist Rebel News for many years, and has literally worked for both Russia Today and the Iranian state TV broadcaster as a quote-unquote journalist. He's a very interesting chap. He's an idiot. He's basically an idiot who dresses up. He dresses a bit like Mao sometimes. He's funny though. He's a funny cunt in a way that he completely won't understand, which is what makes it funny. Like, it's like what all of the great, well, not all, but a lot of the great unknowing historical sort of funny characters. It's because they're not aware of what makes them funny that makes them funny. If they were ever aware of how cringe they are, it would stop being funny, because they become very self-aware and like completely change who they are. So anyway, he did put out a video called China, Russia, Fap, 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 which is very, very funny as a title, but the video itself is actually incredibly boring. It's about how tankies talk about Russia and China. It's very, very tedious. But he did make a video called, and I shit you not, literally go fuck yourself sideways. There we go. Right. He made a video called "If Not White, Who Am I?" Not what am I? Who am I? Okay. Okie doke. Fine. Right. We'll see. We'll see what's going on there. And he wants to sort of dispel myths, largely about like Marxist-Leninists. One of those myths being that their entire identity is wrapped up in being a Marxist-Leninist, and this kind of creepy, self-obsessed rubbish from LARPers. Let's see if he does that successfully in this video.
I want to preface this video by saying something important. In order to understand, a part of what I'm saying here is to understand the difference between being white and whiteness. Whiteness as a sociological category is a prejudiced position where there's this idea of one amalgamated whole white
True.
race.
Very much so.
That's inherently superior to other races. Well, the problem is that there is no such thing as a white race.
True.
The quote-unquote white race is a total, social construct. There are individual races.
Anyway, you get the idea, right? So he's talking about that. We'll speed it up, okay? I just wanted you to get like the full picture of who this person is and the fact that he sounds like that and talks like that. We'll speed it up.
German, English, Italian, etc. These things exist. But whiteness as a category is something that's created to lift oneself above other people, other races, etc., which is why the definition of white has changed over time.
So far, this is all very good stuff, right? He shows an understanding at the start of this. This is the one I've pre-watched. The next one I haven't watched because it's like nearly an hour long. Okay, but this one I did pre-watch. He starts off by having a reasonably good understanding, especially for a tankie, of like ethnicity discourse, right? So there isn't such a thing as a white race. There are different groups of people who are lighter skinned. There are, British people. There are Swedes, although if you ask certain founding fathers, they were swarthy. There are all kinds of different types of whiteoids, right? Not all of us are Angloids. Fact. Are you a tankie? I am not a tankie. This show is about how tankies are kind of dumb and cringe. So yeah, Jason here gives a fair understanding of how this kind of topic is talked about in more non-tanky leftist circles, and his understanding is fine. which makes the thing that we'll get to, you know, toward the end of the thing, the conclusion of his ramblings, all the more funny.
Originally, Italians and Irish were not considered white.
True.
But the demographics began to change.
True. I as an Irishman, right? I am one of the original people of colour. Okay? I was being oppressed by the British long before they ever got to the black people. Okay? The Africans are Johnny come lately to being oppressed by the British. Fact. If anything, everyone owes me reparations. Just saying. Which you can give to me in the form of bits, messages and songs. I promised myself I wouldn't do that joke. Fuck. I am German. What's my whiteness degree? Well, it depends, David. Noted founding father Benjamin Franklin literally said that the only white people that existed were people from Britain and Ireland and Saxony in Germany, presumably because of the Anglo-Saxon thing. He said he described he described the Swedes as swarthy. So in terms of you being German, if you're from that one specific part of Germany, you're in the white club. If not, then sorry, you are basically you're basically African. I think that's how it works. Once you leave, you're from Lower Saxony. Oh, welcome, my white brother. Welcome in, pasty brethren. Oh no, I'm Irish. That means I'm a person of colour, isn't it? Oh, okay. It's difficult to keep up with. Am I white? Am I not white? Who knows? Who knows?
Well, it decided to add the Irish and the Italian in it in order to boost the numbers of white people. So that is to say, to be proud of being white is to be proud of being a group that marginalizes other people and discriminates.
True.
It is okay.
He's not sounding much like a Tankie so far. You're probably thinking to yourself, this guy sounds okay. This guy sounds fine.
Stop it. Get some help.
Well, you would not be thinking that he needs to stop it and get some help. But we are several minutes away from finding out why he does need to stop and get some fucking help. I'm from the Netherlands. Well, again, like I say, you're African. That's just Africa. That's just weed Africa, is what that is. That's weed and canals. Windmills. Clogs. And admittedly beautiful but ineffective football. Just saying. Can we not pay you in potatoes? Alright, let's not go this, but let's not do this. Come on now.
To be proud to be English or German, etc. The problem is whiteness. And one of the problems is that America is whiteness.
True.
Canada is whiteness. Australia is. The British.
Well, there's no need to say it with that kind of sneer. The British. Remember, we still own Canada, okay? We could literally sell you. I mean, you're not worth anything. But we could give you away, okay? We could throw you to the American wolves. Know that.
Our whiteness. Not necessarily English, but Britain as a concept, as a united whiteness concept. So,
okay.
The idea is to no longer identify as white. You are to...
Yeah, to be fair, I say it with a sneer, but I'm allowed to. Because I have to pay for it, so... Well, I suppose technically Canada pays a kind of tithe to the king, doesn't it? Like... I can't believe there are places on the other side of the earth that bow down to the King of England. What the fuck are you doing? Like, it's pathetic enough for the British to do it, but at least they're from here now. They were originally from fucking Germany. And I think not from the white bit of Germany, so what are you going to do? But yeah, I can't believe the Australians are like, no, I don't think we should be an independent country. I think we should continue to lick the boot of people on the other side of the world. What the fuck are you doing? Sort yourselves out.
Return to your European roots, which is what the actual phrase, the Back to Europe movement, actually means, to return to your European roots. They're not talking about actually...
Back to Europe? Is that a thing in North America? Is there a large back to Europe movement? Because we definitely don't fucking want you. And by the way, I know it's not a literal thing. I know they're not saying, like, let's go back to Italy or Ukraine or wherever.
Actually, physically leaving the United States or Canada or Australia,
Actually,
etc.
Ukraine's a good example of the whiteness thing, because the Slavs were never considered white. Like that, they were like basically like. I mean, I joke about like Africans or whatever, because that's sort of how racists talk about things, right? But the Nazis literally saw the Slavs as like also really fucking bad. Like they were horrible. They needed to be exterminated, etc. And now, because it's convenient, the slightly less Slavy Slavs of Ukraine have been welcomed into the white people club for now. Okay, you're on report. Okay, so like, don't think you're in the club. Like, we've allowed you to come in to see if you fit, and then maybe we'll give you membership. But you know, if history is anything to go by, you probably won't get it. You will be tossed aside like an old crusty sock. That's an awful phrase.
It's literally just returning to your original cultural roots, instead of the whiteness, which is most adamantly propounded by white supremacists and their idea of a master race and white people superior, when there really is no.
Fogel, considering we just did a bit about how a Nazi guy fell off an Austrian's favourite mountain, do you want to wind your neck in? Do you want to check yourself before you wreck yourself? Any tea in Boston Harbour jokes will be crushed mercilessly. That's not to be joked about. That's Britain's 9/11, okay? But worse, because there's lots of tea involved. Whereas 9/11 was distinctly not a tea-related event.
Such thing as white people. It's just a racist construct. Okay, I needed to explain that before I get into what I wanted to say. There was a question I had to ask myself. If I no longer identified as white, and part of that whiteness is to reject being Canadian, not the legal category, yes, I am a citizen of Canada, I am a subject of His Majesty King Charles.
You can't really reject being white in a sense, right? Like, you can't stop being what you literally are. You don't have to necessarily associate with the tag. You don't have to like talk of yourself as being white or describe yourself in that way, but you don't fundamentally change who you actually are, right? You're still from the place you're from. You still have the background you have. Let's say you're a white person of, like, I don't know, Danish descent, right? You're Sandy Toksvig, who, by the way, it was International Lesbian Day the other day, and she's my favourite international lesbian. Let's say you're Sandy Toksvig, right? You can reject whiteness as like that concept, that othering concept. But that doesn't stop you from being a light-skinned person of Danish origin, or of, you know, Danish heritage or whatever, right? So you don't have to describe yourself in any other way. You can still just say that you're white, but reject like that whiteness thing. Do you see what I mean? Like, he's clear in understanding the difference between being a white person and whiteness, and yet he's now conflating, I think, if I'm understanding him correctly, the concept of rejecting whiteness with the concept of needing a new ethnicity, which isn't how it works. You're still just the same person you always were before. Thank you, Igloo BC, for resubscribing for 14 fecking months. Yeah, thank you for the reparations. Can I have my land back? I mean, I've never had any land, so I'm not sure what you'd be giving back, but yeah.
In a legal definition, I'm not disputing that. What I'm disputing is the identity of Canadian, which is the history of the stolen.
Well, no, again, no. It's Jesus Christ. You can reject Canada's history and the implied values therein, but you're still a Canadian, as you described. So you can still just call yourself Canadian. You can still just call yourself... No Chagos Islands jokes either, okay? That was like Britain's 9/11 again. The Chagos Islands. We lost some islands that no one knew existed. So have some fucking respect. Anyway, you're still just Canadian. So like you don't need to like. This is the thing. You thinking that you need to reject being Canadian means that you essentially are intrinsically tying the idea of Canada with Canadianness, as if there isn't another way of being that. Like, you are a citizen of Canada and you can be a good person. You aren't, of course, but you can. That is a possibility. You can be an anti-colonialist. You can be a person who fights for the rights of native groups and stuff, right? You can be someone who fights generally for justice and be a Canadian. Unfortunately, considering they're about to elect a fascist, it doesn't seem like many Canadians have chosen that path, and that's a shame. But hopefully more will in the future. I can't believe they're about to reject the fucking blackface guy for someone more racist. Brilliant. Yeah, so I think it's just a fundamental misunderstanding of the distinction that you directly made at the start between the ness of the thing and the thing itself.
On land, etc., which also includes whiteness. So, if I was going to reject that...
But you can't, that's the thing, you can't reject it. You are Canadian. Saying I reject it doesn't mean anything. That doesn't make... Are you now transnational? If you reject being Canadian, what are you then? A fucking stateless pirate? No, you're still just a fucking Canadian, and that's fine. We've all got, you know, character flaws, and yours is being Canadian.
Then the question comes, and I had largely already done that. Just not even trying, just being the way that I am, and I just realized I had pretty much already done that anyway. The question then became...
Listen how fucking boring he is. He's at 1.25 and he's still boring the cock off me. What the fuck?
That's not my identity. What is? And it became a hard question to answer. You know, I have ancestral roots in Ireland.
Oh,
fact,
God, he's one of
us. I
us.
have to go 3 generations back.
Oh, fucking hell, he's one of us. Oh, no. No, we reject you. No, fuck off. Okay? Your family left. That's the end of it. Go away.
I've got Sami roots, etc. But can I say that I ever felt like I was one of these people? Can I say that I ever really felt like I was Irish and I really identified with it? Oh, I can't say that I have. I've never really felt that kind of connection. I wasn't raised in that culture, in that whole sphere of Irishness. I could not say that I've ever experienced it, let alone be raised and, you know, socialized in it.
Okay.
Well,
so I want people to bear in mind, so far the examples he's given are like the colour of his skin, so we're talking about like ethnicity or race, which isn't really a thing, but you know what I mean. It's a thing in as much as people think it's a thing. And nationality. Those are the two things he's sort of rejecting. And the thing he replaces it with is so on point it makes my dick hurt.
And what is my identity?
What is it?
If it's not my European ancestry,
Okay.
and it's not Canadian,
Come on now. Don't fucking blue ball us.
what is it?
Stop edging. Come on.
And that became a difficult question to answer. I could just say something like, oh, you know, post-white.
Anyone who says post-white needs to crawl out of their own asshole. Stop with that shit. It's cringe. Just stop.
I can say that. And I mean, I guess you could say that. You know, I could see that, and that's something people would have a hard time accepting.
post white dog shit through your letterbox. Yes.
So
what is it? Stop fucking edging us. Give us the sweet release we crave. Come on now.
who am I? I mean, I'm not even fully understanding what post-white is. So, who am I? What is my identity? Do I even know? And the fact is, after looking at it, I essentially had to admit, no. I don't know what my identity is. I know my personality, my primary and secondary traits. I know my general mood state.
Wait for it. He's building up.
I know my likes and dislikes, which is the secondary personality traits.
He's definitely got leftist audio.
But in terms of identity, who am I? And that became something I really had to think about. So I sat and I thought, what is the first thing I think of when I think of me? And the first thing that came to mind was Marxist. So,
dopey bastard, man. Oh, the examples he was giving was like his ethnicity and his nationality. And he's like, no, I'm now ethnically Marxist. Oh, fucking hell. Oh, they're so cringe. These people are so... They're a fucking parody. He's racially Marxist. He's ethnically, racially, nationally Marxist. You fucking prick, man. Oh, that's too good. It's too good.
after enough looking at different aspects of myself, long-standing mental illness, last position,
yeah,
I came to realize that my identity is Marxist.
You fucking knob. Oh, you are an absolute bell piece. You really are. You are a fucking penguin spoon. You really are. Oh, my fucking head. What do you even say to this? What do you even fucking say? Look, we take the piss out of Marxist Leninists all the time for being like up their own arse, right? For Marxism, Leninism being the only thing they ever know, the only thing they give a fuck about. And yet, he's literally doing the thing. He's now claiming to be ethnically Marxist. I mean, for a start off, Marx would fucking hate you. Marx would fucking hate. Penguin spoon is a perfectly reasonable thing. Shut up. Anyway, he's racially Marxist. Unbelievable. And then it gets better because he realises how this will look. He still says it though.
My identity really is my political beliefs. And yeah, I know that's going to sound really, really cringy. Just
Yeah. We'll go over to sincerity cam, okay? Yes. Seriously, Jason, it's the cringiest fucking thing I've ever heard. It's fucking embarrassing. You're a grown adult. Stop.
to some people. And, libertarians, right libertarians, are criticized for doing that. They're criticized for making that their whole personality. Yes, I am a Marxist. That is who I am.
No, no, you fucking knob. You started talking about your family heritage in Ireland and how, oh, I don't feel Irish. Right, but that doesn't, you being a Marxist doesn't replace the fact that your fucking great-great-granddad came from County Cork, you dopey bastard. I don't know if that's the actual county he came from. But regardless, right, like, that, he's fucking mental. He's fucking mental. Right, there's something wrong here. Desperately, desperately wrong. What is he talking about? I'm sorry, you being a Marxist does not in any way change the colour of your fucking skin. Post-white, man. Fuck's sake. What? Oh. God, it's sad.
After the last 15 years of doing, quickly approaching 16 years, all this work, educating people, doing the news, etc.
You haven't, honestly, you haven't educated anyone on anything. You've made me laugh heartily for a good decade now, but you haven't actually educated a single person on anything.
It's pretty hard to deny that it's a central core tenet to who I am, what I believe in, the morals and values that I live by, the ones I believe in, and the ones I believe.
Well, okay, this is just racist. Kev, I'm a bit pissed right now. Is that what feeling Irish is like? That's just racist. I've been microaggressed against now. I've had a racism done upon me. Again, I deserve reparations. That's all I'm saying.
It will make the world a better place. It's pretty hard to deny that. So, that's it. That's my identity. Marxism.
No, it isn't. Look, you are a person of Irish extraction. You are a Canadian citizen. You are not, in fact, ethnically Marxist. That isn't a thing. You fucking lunatic. You crazy, deluded mutant. Stop it.
And the unfortunate things I have to live with, like long-standing mental illness, low income, etc. It's pretty hard to deny that class position is an identity. Or at least I'm still a social construct, something that would...
Right, but you're working class, but a lot of working class people aren't Marxists. Not that it would matter. Even if every single working class person was Marxist, they still wouldn't be ethnically Marxist, because that isn't a fucking thing. It's not an identity. It's a political... an economic structure. It's a way of analysing the fucking world. It's a political philosophy. It's not an identity, you fucking knob-end.
Wouldn't exist if poverty didn't exist. But nonetheless, something you certainly do feel. And if nobody's ever been poor who didn't feel like they were poor. Trust me, everybody who's been poor. And I use the word poor lightly. First world poor, if you can even call it that.
Yeah, he's a third world
lumpen aristocrat, I guess you could say.
Lumpen aristocrat. He didn't just drop a lumpen aristocrat on us. Oh my god! Just when you think he can't get more like fucking Marxist Leninist cringest, he really is. Oh, he's a Stalino fucking cringe lord.
What does that mean? What does that really mean for me and who I am?
I don't care.
Like, some people ask the question, what does it mean to you to be black? Or what does it mean to you to be...
No, but dickhead, this is the point, right? This is the... By the way, hello, Frames. Everyone going for hello, Frames. How you doing, brother? Welcome in. What you been up to? Anyway, this is the point, right? Being black is an identity, right? Because people see a black person and know that they're black. They don't stop being black. They can't hide the fact that they're black. Well, they could white up, I guess, but like... Generally speaking, you can't hide the fact that you're a black person or a white person, whatever. Being a Marxist, you could be a black Marxist or a white Marxist. You could be any number of things and a Marxist. But the Marxism is like optional. And it's not something that people know about unless you talk about it. It's not an identity. It's just not. Stop being silly. Good, living up in Florida. Oh, you moved to Florida. Oh, dope. Well, except the fact that it's underwater now, but, Good luck in Atlantis, I guess. I don't know. Why if the hammer and sickle is tattooed on your forehead? No, people are just going to think you're mad. That's fine. Whatever.
German. And probably most people don't have much of an answer, but a lot of people would. But what does it mean to be a Marxist?
It means you believe generally in the socio-economic writings of Karl Marx. You think they are worth something positive in the modern world. That's it. You're not from Marxistan. You're not 12th generation Marxian. You fucking knob.
I understand that, but what does it mean as an identity?
It isn't an identity!
Other than saying to propound the theoretical contributions of Marx, etc. Outside of that, I don't know.
Because it isn't. Because it isn't a thing.
And one that still confounds me to this day. How do I even explain what it is?
You can't, because it isn't a thing. Imagine him trying to explain this. Imagine a black person who's like undergone like fucking racism and shit, and he's like, I feel you, brother. I'm a Marxist. Like, he's on a different fucking planet, this lad. He's fucking gone.
I know what it is. I can label it.
You can label it.
Can
that's
I explain
fine.
It?
Yeah, cool.
Evidently
cool.
not. It's really hard for me to say. So I'm wondering, everybody else out there who's also a Marxist, if you think you may find yourself in this situation as I have, tell me what you think. Go to the comment section and tell me what it is that you believe.
Okay, you know what? We're going to leave a message for him. Shut the fuck up, you twadge. There you go. I got a message. Help us keep comments respectful. If you're not sure whether your comment is appropriate, review our community guidelines.
Fuck, I came up with me all these mutants.
You come in, dear Raiderinos, at a perfect moment. I'm just reviewing the fact that I'm about to post some hate crime, apparently. Fucking hell. Oh, amazing. Amazing. Yes, so, where were we? Oh yeah, the people raided, didn't they? Fuck. Right. Hello, Zachap. Or Zakap, or however you pronounce that. Apologies. Welcome in, Zakap Raiders. We were just watching some Tankie cringe. You know we're going to watch some more Tankie cringe. Although it might not be that cringe. I don't know. I haven't watched it. But whatever. Everyone go and follow Zakap. Immediately. Hello, Raiderinos. You should hit the follow button. You should. You should hit the follow button and subscribe on YouTube and Blue Sky and Threads. Yeah. Anyway, we're going to look at a Hakeem video. He made a video. Hakeem is a Marxoid Leninoid from Iraq. I was going to take a look at his video, the Tiananmen Square massacre in quotation marks. Never happened. But I thought it would be more fun for he then released a video called Liberalism is a Death Cult. Now, I suspect there are going to be bits in this which I will agree with, but quite a lot that I don't. But I did just want to give you that context. He thinks something else is a death cult, and yet he is denying the slaughter of innocent people by the Chinese government. Let's take a look.
Declaration.
Oh.
وإذا قيل لهم لا تفسدوا في الأرض قالوا إنما نحن مصلحون.
Liberalism is supposed to stand for equality, human rights, democracy. Adopted by European colonial empires and their offshoots, self-styled defenders of all those lofty ideals seemingly stand by as a force besieges and murders innocent people.
We have now decided that as part of the process, all applicants for naturalisation must make a written declaration recognising Germany's special responsibility for the state of Israel and recognising the state of Israel's right to exist.
That's Palestine, I think, is being bleeped out there. If you can call that bleeping. Censored, whatever. Yeah, thank you for that, Phantom of Black. Yeah, I did see the message. I didn't know what to say to it, though.
Why are they just standing by, watching it all? Why do they actively support the belligerent force and supposedly refuse to follow their own stated ideals that they impose on the rest of the world by the loan or the gun? Simple. Because liberalism is a death cult. Liberalism, for all its grand ideals, has a history of opportunistic alliances, betrayed treaties, unspeakable violence, and never-ending jingoistic expansionism.
I will just say, a lot of the things you said there... Oh, it's Israel getting bleeped. Oh, okay. A lot of things that you've mentioned there, the Soviet Union were also guilty of. And China has been partly guilty of, some of them at least. Are they also death cults? Because you seem to quite like those. So... just a thought.
In ever-increasing creativity and barbarity. What we're seeing today is the continuation of this legacy, where the promises of freedom and justice are sacrificed to prejudice formed from internalized race science, all for ever-dwindling profit margins.
Okay.
Back to the video in just a minute. Let's hear from today's sponsor, Incognito.
You capitalist whore. Don't forget to give me money, though.
Which is much appreciated. Alright, back to the video.
Back to the video!
It's old news by now, I hope, at least, that freedom-loving Western liberal governments, particularly the United States, have been staunch supporters of the ethno-state since its inception. The diplomatic cover it enjoys by the grace of those Western allies in international forums is unprecedented and oddly unwavering. For example, in the 34 years between 1972 and 2006, the United States vetoed 42 UN Security Council resolutions critical of it. That's more vetoes than the rest of the Security Council in the same period combined. Those vetoed resolutions were supposed to barely address such unserious issues like the in Gaza, or the...
You fucking coward. Just say the fucking words. That's that you listen to this sentence again and try and... Like, he puts it on the screen, but like... A lot of people only listen
to address such unserious issues like the in Gaza.
What the fuck is that? Just say the words, you fucking bell.
Or the violent illegal settlement expansion in the West Bank. This Western barrier has nullified even those minor international efforts, if you could even call them that, to hold to something approaching responsible. Surprising absolutely nobody with two firing neurons, this allows to pursue its frantic campaign without fear of repercussion. This diplomatic protection comes packaged with a sweet military aid deal that is unparalleled in scale and scope, receiving an estimated $310 billion adjusted for inflation since 1948. Israel has been the largest cumulative recipient of US foreign aid in terms of total assistance. This aid has made the military wing of that occupation force into one of the most technologically advanced organizations in the world. Okay. The US commitment to funding the government is codified in the 2014 Memorandum of Understanding signed by President Obama that guarantees $3.8 billion in military aid annually through 2028. This package includes $500 million earmarked for jointly developed missile defense systems, such as the Iron Dome and David Sling. However, it serves another even more sinister purpose.
We must be crystal clear. We stand with Israel.
This aid includes advanced jets like the...
You're even censoring fucking Joe. You're even censoring Brandon.
The F-35 Lightning stealth fighter, used to bomb people living on desolate beaches in tents without food or water. let alone effective defensive weapons or advanced aircraft detection equipment. This is all part of ensuring maintains a so-called qualitative military edge, meaning possessing...
I can't listen to another 50 minutes of fucking every fucking 10 seconds. It's going to drive me mental. At least mix up the sound with something else. A beep or a fucking boing. Like, you know, make it whimsical. Like a fart noise. That'd be funny. Who doesn't like a fart noise?
Overwhelming firepower, up to and including nuclear weapons as a means of deterrence. This isn't just a US policy, it's the law. I'm not joking, this isn't a bit. The law requires the United States to ensure it can defeat any credible conventional military threat. So, in practice, this policy isn't defensive. It merely enables it to project power across the region, intimidate and protect a population of over 600,000 illegal settlers in the West Bank and East Jerusalem.
I will veto any attempt by the UN to impose its will on the Jewish state. It will be vetoed 100%.
Wow, unlike current American policy.
Lobbying is also a major part of the diplomatic side of the equation, and no organization wields more power on that front than the American Public Affairs Committee and other similar organizations. They collectively ensure that any attempt to change behavior and or policy with anything even resembling punishment or accountability is met with fierce opposition, a rigged political system serving a foreign government. It's well documented, almost to the point of nausea, that US policymakers endlessly debate how to influence it without using any of the overwhelming power that they have over them, including placing conditions on aid, a standard and very mild punishment in diplomacy deemed unthinkable when it comes to it, largely due to the risk of being or worse, anti-Semitic, a label that has been weaponized to stifle legitimate criticism of that state. It is in fact anti-Semitic to link to Judaism, but
this is honestly, I can't watch much more of this. It's fucking insufferable. That noise is driving me mad. It's white noise, for fuck's sake.
The conversation for another time. This has been the status.
Oh, Trump is a liberal now. Yeah, this is the thing with Marxist-Leninists. Everyone to the right of them, although I would argue they are far right in many cases, but regardless, they consider themselves to be on the left. Anyone to the left of them is a liberal. They will literally argue that Nazis are liberals. It's just liberalism in decay and all this sort of thing.
Quo for decades and has had a major role in leading us to where we are today. The very tools that could be used to pressure it to changing its policies, such as conditioning military...
Even though demonstrably, of course, fascists are the undermining of liberalism. Not the only undermining of liberalism. Socialism is an undermining of liberalism to some extent. But fascists are the utter rejection of those liberal values.
Sanctions or military intervention are employed to reinforce its place in the world, rather than aid the actually oppressed. For instance, the ongoing issue of illegal settlement expansion is only possible because US aid basically supplies the infrastructure and security apparatus that makes these settlements and the occupation as a whole...
Yeah, I've heard Marxist-Leninists say that Mao was a liberal, yeah. They're fucking mental. They are actually mental, yeah.
...possible. The discourse around the and is carefully crafted, mostly by liberal think tanks and liberal media darlings, to make Americans identify with citizens, which, given America's own colonial history, is easy to do.
Pardon me.
The language of shared values and strategic alliances are euphemisms to mask the underlying reality, ironically truthful in how shared the values really are for both nations, of racism and slaughter on the ground. This support has also meant that this behavior hasn't affected its economy until very recently. While it begins to suffer limited consequences due to their ongoing genocide of Palestinians,
now this is the thing, Madcat, I don't want to besmirch Marxists. Marxists are a perfectly reasonable bunch. It's Marxist-Leninists that are the problem. Marxists are fine. I think if you're like an absolute orthodox Marxist, you're wrong, but you're not a bad person. But Marxism in of itself is fine. It's Marxism-Leninism, which itself is a corruption of Marxism. That is the problem.
That state stands as the 14th richest so-called country per capita. Based just on this, without looking at anything else, Americans should be outraged that US aid to the occupation remain so substantial and unconditioned while they themselves suffer without healthcare and shelter. This level of support is slowly becoming difficult to justify, but it isn't at the level yet to make any real difference. Conveniently overlooked in all this is the fact that the occupation's actions are fundamentally at odds with the stated values of democracy and human rights that on paper these liberal governments claim to uphold. Meanwhile, their vassal state commits and we're not supposed to blink an eye. The humanitarian impact of these policies has been devastating. Current reports have only been able to account for a fraction of the likely total death toll. The Lancet recently pointed out that it could be, conservatively, over 186,000 people. They only show the 40,000 number because that's the number of Palestinians that have been identified, an insultingly low figure. These aren't and should never be just numbers. They represent tens of thousands of lives lost, families shattered. The US and other liberal governments are accomplices in this violence.
Yeah, same, Rohak, same.
And if the ICC had any teeth or real integrity, there would have been a lot more arrest warrants issued.
Okay.
How did we get here? How did the freedom and democracy ideology find itself supporting a ethno-state in the 21st century? To answer that, we'll go back to the 18th century, and back in the glow of the so-called Enlightenment. It's around this time that liberalism, once a fringe idea, begins to...
Oh, don't do that, the so-called Enlightenment. That seems unnecessary. Unless you're doing that to juxtapose it to the fact that the Dark Ages weren't so dark and all that. But I suspect that's not what he's doing. He's just doing this kind of weird, I don't know, anti-Western thing of like, the Enlightenment was shit. Arabs and Chinese people were doing loads of cool stuff at the time. Yeah, we know. We know. There was a lot of European chauvinism involved in all of this. Yeah, we know. But that doesn't mean that the Enlightenment wasn't a period of significant scientific and cultural advance. Because it was. That's fine. Look, just because there are some dickheads who use it badly, and indeed used it badly at the time, doesn't make it any less intrinsically worthwhile. It just means those people were bad actors. And you rejecting it offhand like that is, dare I say, unmaterialist. Or dematerialist. Whatever. You're not being a very good Marxist. Although then again, you're not very good at Marxism, are you?
To gain traction. As a result, this period is often romanticized by liberals as the dawn of reason, when values such as individual liberty, rule of law, and of course the right to private property became the cornerstones of what we call liberalism. It's this ideology which has shaped most Western so-called democracies as we know them today. But the same people who championed these ideals also laid the groundwork for colonialism, chattel slavery, and systemic racism.
That is true, but again, I will just point out that Marx wrote rather positively about the necessity for this period of transition, because you had to have essentially liberal capitalism come along in order to kickstart the Industrial Revolution, which can then lead to industrial socialism. He literally argued directly, and I think quite convincingly, that it would be impossible to go from feudalism to communism. There needed to be an intermediary step, or possibly 2 or 3 steps, but certainly some kind of step in between those, which was liberalism. Now, of course, it gets corrupted, as you point out here. I'm not suggesting he was for the South African apartheid regime, although he was quite racist himself, of course. A man a product very much of his own time. But yeah.
While it is true the Enlightenment is an 18th century phenomenon, our story really kicks off around 300 years earlier, in 1492. The so-called discovery of America by the Spanish is hailed as an achievement worthy of awe. How you can discover a place already inhabited is left unexplained.
Fair.
But this marks the beginning of Eurocentric institutionalism. This ideology, which predates liberalism, says that all races and peoples are capable of developing, but only when they have acquired rational institutions through a Western civilizing mission. The final form of this idea, codified in the 19th century, says science proves that Europeans are the superior race, culture, and society. Well, isn't that just lucky? Therefore, the subjugation of other cultures and populations in order to civilize them is good.
If you want to argue that racism is a death cult, that's fine. But that's not what this video is called, is it?
Actually, with this superiority
unless you're arguing that liberalism is itself intrinsically the only thing that can create such racism. Because I assure you it isn't. Colonialism vastly predates liberalism. Racism vastly well, not racism in the scientific sense, but like in-group, out-group bullshit vastly predates it. There was the in Roman times, they had a much more simple concept of being either a Roman or a barbarian. It's essentially racism, but on a more broad scale. And that, again, vastly predates liberalism. So you're kind of like arguing against nothing here. If that makes sense. Like, it's not a bad point that racism is bad and will lead naturally to like horrifically murderous and genocidal outcomes. But again, I don't know anyone who needs to be educated on that point. At least, let's say, in leftist spaces. There are lots of fucking normoids who could fucking learn it, but, you know.
Complex, global societies outside of Europe were, and still are, cast as backward, unable to progress without the West and its big white man-powered brain. But wait, races? Where did the concept of race come from? In short, also liberalism.
Well, that... okay. The evolution of Homo Marxensis? That is true. The ascent of Marx. There you go. Fact. Hang on, he was German. Was he from Saxony? I don't know what bit of Germany he was from. He's born in Trier. Is that Saxony? I don't know. Was Marx white or not white, according to Benjamin Franklin? We do need to know. He looks a bit suave, though.
Before the age of colonization, Enlightenment, the modern idea of race...
No. See, this is just fucking anti-Western shittery. Or, anti-intellectual shittery. The age of colonialism. No, colonialism existed prior to this. Long before this. The Romans did colonization. On 3 fucking continents. The Phoenicians did colonization. Fuck, the ancient, the tribes of North America colonized one another. It's a thing that existed throughout all of humanity. Or throughout all of history, anyway. It's a thing that happens. The Enlightenment wasn't a thing that brought it about. This is just ahistorical wank. Literally, why do you think there are fucking Arabs in Iraq? My dude, Areno, you live in Iraq. Why are there Arabs there? There weren't always. Why are there Muslims there? There weren't always. Colonization happened. Wars of conquest happened. Long before liberalism ever existed. It's just a thing. Look, it's so fucking stupid. God damn.
Didn't exist. Race, an arbitrary hierarchy based on supposed biological differences, was purpose-built to justify the brutal, inhumane treatment of non-European peoples in a...
That is true. This bit's true, yeah.
...variety of degrading ways. What may have begun as a way to explain the phenotypic differences between people evolved into a tool for maintaining oppressive racial and colonial violence. Today, this racial classification is part of the foundation for the general exploitation of the global South that persists to this day. Enter John Locke, the father of liberalism.
Have you even read Locke? Old school memes! Fuck yes.
Locke is famous for his supposedly unique and original advocacy for life, liberty, and property. But while Locke railed against political slavery imposed by absolute monarchies, he had no qualms about the literal enslavement of African peoples. In fact, Locke was directly involved in the transatlantic slave trade, holding investments in the Royal African Company. No points for guessing what they did. Unsurprisingly, Locke's views on indigenous peoples were no less horrifying. He saw them as obstacles to progress, due in part to not understanding complex concepts like property.
I'd rail Locke. Okay, time out. I'd rail Locke. Locktober. Jesus Christ, you people are insufferably horny. Also, hello, Nomadic Hermit 42. Welcome to the Kevolution.
Or the value of labor, things indigenous people everywhere had but valued it differently. It's Locke who gives future genocidal maniacs one of the most powerful racist ideas of all time. Lands inhabited by indigenous peoples are vacant, waiting to be claimed by those who can improve it through labor.
Yeah, homesteading is a very, very silly concept. And a very, very dangerous concept, as you've seen.
Since this time, Locke's definition of vacant or uncultivated...
Now, to be fair, what I will say is that this concept is essentially cope. It's realising that the old school conquest of just taking someone else's shit, it seems a bit off. In a world where private property exists and where the commons exists, not the commons as in the House of Commons, like a commonly held property, a thing that everyone relies on, like water, something like that, right? In a world where that sort of thing exists, you can't just take some shit from people without it being incredibly unethical. So they come up with an intellectual cope, an absolute cope. This concept of it being vacant because it's been it's being used unproductively and therefore it's vacant, right? Which is just a way of trying to intellectually get around the concept of the private property rights thing while still doing the violent, disgusting imperialism which had always existed. That's it. It's not that liberalism is inherently bad, or that liberalism inherently leads to this thing, that it worked out exactly in this way. Because, of course, that's not how history works. You're almost... he's sort of falling into this trap that I think a lot of people do, of imagining that history had to go this way. That it was sort of, not necessarily preordained, but like, this was always how it was going to have worked out. When, of course, it isn't. People make decisions. Social movements form. Political movements form. Economic blocks form. Natural disasters happen. Lots of things influence, the way these things go. What was... Oh, hang on, I've lost my fucking thread now. Yeah, anyway. Luna Rosa, did I ever tell you I'd found in my city was a Jewish family bone going inside? What? That a well was found in my city with the Jewish family bones going inside. It was from a medieval murder. Really? Good God. Okay. Yeah, Marx was basically a product of the Enlightenment, yes. He was Hegelian. Yes. Literally, he was a part of a group called the Young Hegelians when he was at college.
Cultivated land has been and is still used as justification for the displacement and extermination of indigenous populations all over the world. And as convenient as it would be to blame one person for this, Locke wasn't alone in these views. His ideas were echoed by other prominent thinkers of the time, such as Hugo Grotius and John Stuart Mill.
John Stuart Mill, of his own free will, on half a body shandy was particularly ill. It's true. Well, that is literally true. Okay, if you're just going to quote like old-timey people being racist and supporting colonialism, you could do that from any perspective, right? Like you could go back to ancient Rome and do exactly the same fucking thing. The way they talked of and treated barbarians was no better than the way in which the Spanish or the English or the French treated the native peoples of North America. Like, this isn't liberalism's issue. This is humanity's issue. This is just ahistorical wank. And I'm not a person who likes liberalism, particularly. I think it was an advance on what came before, but I think it's outdated now. I think we need something better, far better. But this is like... This is just like cherry-picking bits of nonsense. Like, there are plenty of liberal Enlightenment people who weren't like this. Like, you talk about the enslavement. There were plenty of anti-slavery movements that got going because of the movement for the Enlightenment and liberalism that came along with it. They were literally inspired to be anti-slavery because of that same individualist, liberationist principle. You know? But does that make liberalism inherently all about freedom? No, because again, it's humanity's fucking problems.
Grotius, considered the father of international law, provided a framework that justified both slavery and the genocidal practices being carried out in the Americas, but in legal terms. Mill argued that despotism was a legitimate form of government when dealing with barbarians, but only if the overall goal is so-called progress or improvement. For Mill, liberty was only applicable to those who were mature enough to handle it and thus have a right to self-governance. You know, mature people, like Europeans, who imploded the world twice over during the past century. The language these men used to talk about...
That's a fair point. For all of the civilization of the European people, they did a couple of whoopsies, a couple of little whoopsie daisies. To quote Murray.
Non-European peoples during the time, terms like savages and barbarians were common, had deadly staying power.
Okay, where did they get the word barbarian from? Where does that arise from? It's the ancient Romans. This kind of racism, albeit of a less scientific nature, of course. They tried to add a veneer of intellectualism to it. But this kind of in-group, out-group fucking bigotry has always existed in one form or another. The Romans saw themselves as Romans, civilized, noble, cultured. And they saw the barbarians as the opposite of that, and therefore they needed to be destroyed, conquered, taken over, civilized. It was very white man's burden in some respects, actually. Take over the place and make it civilized, and reap the rewards. Although, of course, when they came to Britain, they never really reaped the rewards. It's one of the few things I'm proud about this land. We were basically like Rome's Vietnam. Just an economic sink with, you know, raiding parties and terrorism and things. Not that I'm proud of terrorism. Don't come to my door, police. Leave me the fuck alone.
After all, they weren't just insults. They were part of a larger effort to frame non-European societies as inherently inferior, possibly even not human, so that they could claim they needed the all-knowing guiding hand of the West to achieve progress and, eventually, if they're good, civilization. This patronizing and infantilizing racist narrative didn't only justify colonialism for them, it made it a moral imperative. The Western world didn't just conquer, it convinced itself that it had the duty.
Yeah, they did get some tin, to be fair. But, like, it always cost the Romans far more than they ever got out. Because they had to keep such large armies here. Because we were constantly rowing. I say we, the Scots mostly.
Duty to do so. Okay, so we see that this ideology has a foundation of embarrassing nonsense. So why was this narrative so convincing to so many? Was it just about economic gain? Getting filthy rich was absolutely a motivating factor, but one of the foundational beliefs of these racists was and is a deep-seated belief in the superiority of the West. But because they cloaked their insane bigotry in the language of liberalism, it was made to seem normal and good. Say what you will about the fickleness of modern liberals, the original thinkers and earliest adopters were true believers that thought they were burdened by the task of bringing rational institutions to uncivilized peoples. It is disturbing.
Which again, I think is mostly a cope, Burka.
To learn just how deeply embedded and foundational racism is to liberalism. Without this foundational racism, how could anybody justify the horrors of colonialism? Western Europeans, so completely insecure about their place in the world that they had to dream up hierarchies with them on top, had to dehumanize those they were colonizing.
Oh my god, every group who colonized anywhere had such hierarchies. Again, not necessarily based on science, because science is a relatively modern thing. But when the Romans went into Britannia, what is it you think they were doing there? They thought of themselves as higher, as more worthy, as more civilized, and bringing civilization. And again, vastly predates liberalism. This isn't a fucking feature of liberalism alone. This isn't liberalism shit. This is humanity shit. Thank you, James Holmes, for gifting 5 memberships. Much fucking love to you, chap. Absolutely beautiful work.
And did so with alarming efficiency. This toxic ideology, paired with advancements in weaponry, such as firearms, allowed European powers to spread like...
Well, whiteness is arbitrary to an extent, yes. I mean, obviously there are people with light skin, sure. But what is white? I mean, as previously discussed in the other video, there are different types of sort of white people. And different peoples, different groups have moved in and out of the whiteness category. Most recently, of course, the Ukrainians have been welcomed because of geopolitical necessity, or at least geopolitical opportunism, have been welcomed into the white people fold. Racists from all over Europe have been welcoming in Ukrainians temporarily into their country to show how brilliant and awesome we are, because fuck those even more Slavic peoples over there. You know, that sort of thing. The Irish were certainly not seen as white for many centuries. The Italians are not considered white by some. Like, how white is white exactly? Is a Romanian white? What about a Bulgarian? I mean, that fucking borders Turkey. So is that white? What about someone from Cyprus? They're they're husky. But they're also a bit Greek. And the Greeks invented fucking democracy and the West and all of that. So, like, do you know what I mean? So it's a bit arbitrary, yeah. Yeah. Though, as we discussed, Benjamin Franklin literally thought the people of Britain and Saxony in Germany, because again, Anglo-Saxon, were the only white people. And their descendants, of course, of which he was one. So yeah, it's pretty arbitrary. What about people from Birmingham? No, we are the ultimate people of colour. We are the most oppressed minority. Fact.
Like a plague. Not because of any inherent superiority, but because of economically derived jumps in productive capacity that increase productivity and military efficiency. Materialism 101. History is long, and the same thing happened essentially by chance and social change in ancient Iraq, in the Far East, amongst the magnificent powers of the Andes, and eventually in Western Europe. Only Europe, however, developed an international institutionalized system of colonial violence via the steam engine and pig iron. Back on track.
Okay, but like, you can't say that that's just a European thing. The Mongols, i.e., you know, the tribes from what we would, I suppose, say now Mongolia, Genghis Khan, etc., had a continent-spanning empire from the steppe in Asia, Central Asia, well, East Asia, all the way through to the gates of Europa, and off into parts of the Middle East and all sorts, and the various khanates thereafter. This wasn't just a European thing. Other peoples from other places have also done this. Like, are you literally just saying now that there's something intrinsic about Europeans that means that they're the only motherfuckers that do this? Because I assure you that's not true. The native peoples of various parts of the world have also engaged in this kind of more localized, admittedly, colonialism and plunder and destruction of other peoples. This isn't just a European thing. Now, the Europeans, because of the, as you mentioned there, the kind of arbitrary industrial expansion that allowed for guns and pig iron and all the rest of it, were able to more efficiently do it, and therefore they took over larger expanses of the world. But that doesn't change the fact that, you know, Genghis Khan existed. It doesn't change the fact that the Incas spread massively over parts of Western South America. These are things that happen. It's not just Europeans doing this shit. And you pretending otherwise is just a bit kind of weird. Like, I get that you probably don't like Europeans very much, considering you're from Iraq, and Europeans and their descendants from America have destroyed your country twice within your lifetime. So I get that, but that doesn't mean you have to be ahistorical with them. And, like, essentialist? You're kind of being a bit essentialist and a bit silly.
Back in 2 centuries prior, though, sadly this colonial violence and exposure to diseases from which indigenous people had no immunity allowed European nations to, more easily than ever before, gain control over vast resources and...
Actually, diseases were less of an issue than I think most sort of old scholarship would make you think. I think that a lot of older historians and antiquarians wanted to put it down to disease, because then it's not really the Europeans' fault, because they weren't trying to infect them. I mean, smallpox blankets aside, they weren't trying to infect people, so it wasn't really their fault that they all died. Actually, colonialism did kill most of those people, either directly or indirectly. Even those that did die of disease, of course, had their bodies and their abilities to be able to deal with illness vastly undermined by colonialist plunder, by being forced off their native lands, by having their food stocks massively affected, these sorts of things. So actually, it was just imperialism. And I'm not suggesting, by the way, here that Hakim is doing that thing of trying to provide an excuse for European colonialists. I'm just saying that's a thing that, you know, that's a historical trap you don't want to fall into on the altar of wanting to appear to be historically accurate, because ultimately it isn't historically accurate. But they'll do this. They'll say you can't attack Columbus because the Taino people were exterminated. They all died of disease. Blah 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 blah. The fact is that about 90% of the Taino people were already murdered by the time the first noted case of pox was found in the native population. Now, that's not to say that some of them hadn't already died and it just hadn't been noticed, although that seems a little bit weird. I think they would notice, anyway. They'd been killing them, they'd been working them to death, they'd been murdering them, they'd been selling their women off into sex slavery. This was a directly genocidal cause. It wasn't just disease. In fact, it was very little to do with disease. It was murder. It was racist murder.
And accumulate previously unimaginable amounts of wealth. The reliance on slave labor to provide a decisive advantage in the global economy all but guaranteed extremely high profit rates. The discovery of precious metals in the Americas, the explosion of cash crops, and the conquest of Asian and African territories were all part of this process. A process that Marx famously described as the rosy dawn of capitalist production. The West's appetite for so-called progress by the brutal exploitation and displacement of millions from their land was ravenous. The Caribbean, Central America, South America, various coastal and inland regions of Africa, Asia, and Pacific Islands were all affected by this insatiable...
No, 255, that's mucho texto, mate. It's mucho texto.
...drive for resources and wealth. The parallels to modern-day rhetoric are striking. Think about the language used in the so-called War on Terror, for example. Terms like terrorists and rogue states serve a very similar purpose to savages and barbarians, which are now only used by the old-school lunatics and talking heads. They dehumanize, they create an other, and they justify intervention for material gain and profit margins.
Luna, that is a very specific and weird question. Is it common for your McDonald's in Birmingham to have police guarding them? Not in my experience. No. Is that a thing you saw when you were in the city? I mean, unless there's a very specific reason why they're doing that. I don't know.
March 1814. Topeka at the Horseshoe Bend, present-day Alabama. Future President Andrew Jackson, then a military officer, took 700 militiamen and 600 indigenous allies to attack a camp where Muskogee women and children were sheltering. In the aftermath of this so-called battle, Jackson and his troops stripped the skin off of the bodies of the Muskogee women and children they just slaughtered and used them to make reins for their horses. Jackson justified these incredibly horrific acts of pointless cruelty by saying, in part, "How lamentable it is that the path to peace should lead through blood, and over the carcasses of the slain, but it is in the dispensation of that providence which inflicts partial evil to produce general good."
Yeah, the white man's burden bullshit, yeah, we know.
Andrew Jackson is still celebrated as an American hero to this day. This admittedly shocking example is, unfortunately, an accurate portrayal of how liberal ideology facilitates extreme violence in the name of progress.
Right, but again, it doesn't matter if it's liberalism as such, okay? Because this exact kind of civilizing mission type stuff existed before this. This isn't... Oh God, I don't want to just repeat myself here, but look, it's... What he's done is hit upon a fault of humanity and applied it to a political philosophy of the 18th century. Like, it existed before then and it will exist after. It's not intrinsic to liberalism. And by the way, again, I just want to repeat, liberalism, I'm not a liberal, I don't fucking care for it. But he's attacking it in, like, the wrong way here. Because he's a fucking tanker.
Civilization, freedom, and democracy. But before Andrew Jackson, there was the British Empire, the champion bringers of civilization of the era. The British were colonial pioneers, so we should see how they did things. First off, they were driven by the
pioneers, you hear that? We were pioneers.
Deeply ingrained racist belief that they alone could, and therefore were morally required to, spread their liberal ideal of progress to the so-called backward peoples of the world. At least on the surface, the real reason was capital accumulation and domination of markets.
Yep.
Second, they sought to dominate both the physical and intellectual landscapes of its colonies, particularly in Asia. British Orientalist scholars like Sir William Jones constructed an image of the East that conveniently reinforced the idea that Europeans, who would have thunk, were a superior race. These scholars depicted the Orient as exotic, stagnant, and, of course, in desperate need of Western intervention, which, to them, legitimized their despotic rule over these colonized people who were forced to modernize. The Opium Wars in China exemplify both the dangers of liberalism as an ideology and the British generally. Britain waged 2 wars against China to force the Qing dynasty to open its markets to British opium, which was devastating Chinese society. The first Opium War...
Yeah, it's unbelievably fucked up. Imagine fighting in a war so that you can sell what is essentially heroin. It's unrefined heroin to Chinese people. God, that's evil. That's compound evil. It's evil on top of evil. It's not just your regular colonial war. It's colonial war to sell drugs, to be the biggest drug-running empire ever. Fucking hell.
War resulted in the Treaty of Nanking. This is the origin of British rule over Hong Kong. It was
literally true. Literally true. That's why we had Hong Kong. And why we ultimately had to give it back in, was it 97 or whatever? Because the lease ran out.
In this treaty. They also forced China to open 5 ports to British trade and grant special rights to British citizens. The Chinese referred to this era as the Century of Humiliation, during which Western powers imposed a series of unequal treaties on China to exploit its resources and opium-addicted citizens. The wars were not about free trade or mutual benefit. They were about securing British economic interests through the use of force, at the expense of an entire nation's well-being.
Yep.
Unfortunately, this isn't the worst colonialism the British ever did. India is definitely in the discussion for most exploited people to ever suffer under British rule.
True.
One of the British colonial administration's first moves was to implement liberalizing economic policies, mostly through the destruction or destabilization of indigenous industry capable of outcompeting the British.
Yeah, we literally destroyed it. We stole so much wealth from the Indian continent, it's ridiculous. Look, it almost seems trite to talk about just giving them the Kohinoor diamond back, which, by the way, we should. Because the amount of actual wealth we stole from the subcontinent, and that includes Pakistan and Afghanistan, Sri Lanka and Bangladesh, is just almost incalculable. It really is. You should read the works of Dalrymple. Jonathan Dalrymple is a very good British writer. A tiny bit Libby at times, but generally a very good writer on Indian affairs. Exceptionally good. He's a British historian who wrote about, the Raj and things.
Which devastated the economy, unsurprisingly. Devastated doesn't actually quite capture it, though, because they actually rolled back progress the subcontinent had already made without Western intervention. For example, by following enlightened liberal principles, the British deindustrialized India's textile industry, so British-made clothes could flood the market created by not allowing Indians to make their own clothing. This economic collapse predictably impoverished the population, and export policies diverted Indian food supplies to meet the demands of the global market, policies similar to those the British had used in Ireland. The Great Bengal Famine of 1770 killed an estimated 10 million people as a result of these policies, 1.5% of the world population at the time. To give some perspective, World War II and all its casualties killed a similar rough percentage of the total world population. This is among one of the most heinous massacres in human history, and the UK has never been held to account. Of course, Britain wasn't the only colonization enthusiast in town. Britain went to many places from their tiny island to colonize places. The continent of Africa is the opposite of that. Colonizers from many European countries invaded the continent. It was so...
You going to talk about the Ottomans? Maybe? Talk about how the Ottomans did that as well? Or is it just beating up on Europeans tonight? It's just the Europeans, right? Okay.
So significant that historians gave it a name, the Scramble for Africa, from the 1880s and ending in 1914. I wonder why. Again, liberalism rushes in to justify more violent subjugation, but in a brand new place. The major powers held what we call the Berlin Conference of 1884-1885, where European powers divided Africa amongst themselves, as if it was already theirs to divide amongst themselves, conducted under the pretense of bringing civilization to the continent. I'm not being repetitive. History is, sadly. The true desire, however, lay in goals of exploiting Africa's vast resources and reserve of cheap labor to fuel Europe's industrialization.
Victory is ours!
What was that? Hello, Al Rakabi. Welcome on board. Welcome to the Kivolution.
Although there are a lot of bad guys in the story, there are few more notorious than King Leopold II in the Congo. Leopold also claimed to be one of those civilizing Africa, but his rule was extremely brutal, even for the time. It of course used forced labor, but also committed many mass atrocities, resulting in the deaths of millions of
It's even worse than that. Dalrymple is spelled with a Y instead of an I. Just to be even weirder.
Congolese. King Leopold II was also interested.
Sorry, I keep forgetting that not everyone reads the fucking chat. John said, hello there, John. Joe, the cop, says Dalrymple. I can't believe Brits are allowed to have such silly names.
Rubber and ivory abundant at the time in the Congo in order to stock up on money. He was likewise fond of souvenirs. These souvenirs were actually 267 Congolese human beings. At the 1897 Brussels World Fair, Leopold showcased these Congolese people as living exhibits, a spectacle for European audiences, all under the guise of spreading civilization. Similar events continued in Western Europe until the late 1950s.
Well, it was industrialised as in they had large-scale industry. They didn't have manufactories, so they didn't have, like, European-style factory systems, but they had genuinely huge, burgeoning cotton industry and stuff, which Britain destroyed so that the cotton mills of northern England could boom.
As the 20th century dawned, the language of liberalism changed to the form it more or less takes today. Instead of civilizing missions, they are promoting democracy, protecting human rights, and bringing freedom. Yet the methods used to achieve these goals are often indistinguishable from those used by the...
Okay, Joe is not actually a cop. That joke is from like 6 years ago. I apologise.
Empires of old. Coercion, violence, and exploitation continue to be the go-to tools for spreading liberalism. Oh, hold on, I suddenly remember what happened in 1914 to stop the scramble for Africa. World War I shuffled geopolitics and left the US as the only world power. The result was the United States taking over as the brave torchbearer of liberalism. During the Spanish-American War, the US claimed to be liberating the Philippines from Spanish rule, only to impose its own colonial regime. The Philippine-American War that followed showcased the ability of the United States to brutally repress resistance. US forces killed hundreds of thousands of Filipinos in the name of bringing democracy and civilization. Kind of hard to participate in democracy when you're denied the right to live, but I digress. During the Cold War, the US supported numerous authoritarian regimes around the world, from Latin America to Southeast Asia, under the guise of containing communism, which I've talked about before. Democracy only when you vote right, of course. Not for the people, but for the Wall Street Journal readers, as a single song goes. Anyways, these US-backed regimes were almost always responsible for gross human rights abuses, such as massacres, genocide, and death squads. They were propped up because they served some esoteric US strategic interest or another. The US-backed coup in Guatemala in 1954, for instance, led to decades of civil war and repression, with tens of thousands of civilians killed. In Indonesia, the US supported the military dictatorship of Suharto, which is responsible for the mass death of up to 1 million people. Liberalism...
Look, don't get me wrong, this is all true. But I think it is worth juxtaposing to the idea that, like, he supports regimes which have done, I don't want to say as evil, but like similarly evil shit. The Soviet Union supported the horrific, brutal dictatorships of various countries at various times for their own geopolitical reasons. And yet he's happy to support that regime. Again, you're not anti-imperialist, you've just chosen the other colonizer. Or the other imperialist, I should say. The Soviet Union didn't really colonise as such, but I suppose it could be argued they certainly did in parts of Central Asia. Yeah, actually, no, I'll say that. Yeah, they did, yeah.
The paragon of equality and acceptance, has killed more people than any other ideology in history and counting. NATO's intervention in Yugoslavia in 1999 and Libya in 2011 are a prime example of the iron grip liberalism has on geopolitics. Both interventions were sold as humanitarian efforts to protect civilian populations from oppressive regimes. Interestingly, this never stretches to victims of NATO bombing, or Palestinians. In Yugoslavia, NATO justified its bombing campaign by claiming it was necessary to prevent an ethnic cleansing in Kosovo, despite the fact that most atrocities had occurred after the bombing began. In Libya, the intervention was justified by the need to protect civilians from Gaddafi's evil government, yet the result was destabilization, misery, the proliferation of armed militias, and a severe humanitarian crisis. In both cases, rather.
They did, yes, actually, that's a very good point, yes. Kaliningrad, which is a Russian enclave. No, exclave, I should say. I.e. a bit of the country that isn't attached to the main bit. It's over there. It's the former city of Königsgrad, in what was Germany. Because people forget that most of what is now Poland, Western Poland, was formerly Germany, and most of what was Eastern Poland is now bits of Belarus and Ukraine. It's very strange. Anyway, almost as if they were colonising the place. Anyway, they took over the city and literally drove all of the German inhabitants out and then moved Russians in. So they literally did do absolutely some colonisation. Yeah. Which we still live with today, because that's still a part of Russia.
Ironically, the rhetoric of human rights was...
Should probably point that out for people geographically who don't know what that is. And it's named after, by the way, a guy called Kalinin, who was a Russian revolutionary who died just after the war. So they went, oh, we'll name that city after him. Show and a map of Europe. There we go. So, if we go onto the map, it's this bit. Hang on. What? Oh, for fuck's sake. Right. How do I highlight it? I can't highlight that. It's that little bit there. Why? There. That bit. That little bit there. Wedged in between Lithuania and Poland. There's a little chunk of land. And it's basically a city and some countryside around it. It's there. And that's, by the way, where they have a lot of nuclear weapons. In case Western Europe decides to get uppity.
Used to justify actions that led to widespread suffering and death. Once Western geopolitical and economic goals were met, the feigned worry over the lack of human rights and democracy disappears overnight. It's not just...
Is it recognised? Oh, yeah, no, it's recognised as a part of Russia. Yeah. It was accepted in... look, it was taken by the Soviets as, like, reparations for the war and all that. Along with lots of other things as well, by the way, but regardless. It was taken as reparations, and so it was absorbed into the Soviet Union as it then was. But the Lithuanians didn't want to take it. The Lithuanian SSR, Soviet Socialist Republic. So the Russian SSR just went, okay, well, just for like, bureaucratic, necessity, we'll just accept it as part of the Russian SSR. Which wasn't a problem when they were all part of the Soviet Union. Fine, not a problem. Then, of course, the Soviet Union stopped being a thing, and all of a sudden there was this little chunk of Russia all the way over there. Which is a bit problematic. But there we go.
Military operations, invasions or bombings. Sometimes all you need is a simple grift to colonize a country. The late 20th century saw the invention of one such crime referred to as the Structural Adjustment Program by the International Monetary Fund and World Bank. These programs are forced onto exploited, usually global south countries, desperate for any assistance. These programs require countries to implement strict, sometimes devastating neoliberal austerity measures in order to receive these loans in exchange for the sovereignty, meaning that the unelected IMF and World Bank are allowed to dictate a significant amount of policy for entire countries. In Argentina, for instance, the adoption of structural adjustment programs resulted in widespread poverty, unemployment, and social unrest as public services were cut, industries were privatized, and the economy was open to foreign exploitation. In Jamaica, the implementation of structural adjustment programs led to the collapse of local industries, increased unemployment, and a rise in poverty, as the country was forced to open its markets to cheap imports from the US and Europe. The impact on Africa of these neoliberal policies continues
Capitalism fucking sucks ass, yeah. I know.
To be particularly problematic.
I'll be honest with you though, this video is fucking boring, man. How's everyone else feeling about it? I'll carry on if people are enjoying it, but he's sort of preaching to the converted, basically.
Newly independent countries were forced to open their economies to foreign corporations who then would proceed to steal the country's resources and wrote their economic policies for the benefit of the former colonizers, who continue in the same trend though by different methods. Privatization of public assets, ending most or all welfare programs, and liberalization of trade deepened poverty and inequality across the continent. This is in stark contrast to the path many Western European and North American nations took, in which they were heavily protectionist. Rules for me, not for thee, or the other.
Okay, we'll move on then, fuck it. Okay, so, tankies are a bit cringe. What's this?
Hello everybody, this is...
A quick palate cleanser. Yeah, we can do a quick palate cleanser. Fuck it.
Hello everybody, this is my presentation on why the Irish Republican Army canonically exists in the Disney Pixar Cars universe. Let's start at the beginning. In the movie...
Hang on a minute. The IRA exists in the Cars universe. Okay.
Cars 2, there's a car version of the Catholic Pope. There he is, that's him. Which,
okay.
There being a car Catholic Pope means that there's a full-on car Catholic religion, a car Catholic church.
Right.
A car Catholic church means that there was a car Jesus Christ. Jesus Chrysler, if you so will.
Jesus Chrysler. Excellent work.
There being a car Jesus Chrysler means that car King Henry VIII, when he wanted to divorce his wife, had to split the Catholic religion and the Protestant religion into separate entities, which means the cars had two different sects of Christianity.
True.
Which means that there was a car version of the Protestant Catholic struggles in the north.
True. Honestly, the car dissolution of the monasteries was bad times.
Of Ireland. Which means ultimately there was a car IRA. And it probably looked something like that. But the question remains, now that we cleared this up, if the cars were the members, then did they explode? Did they blow up? Human bombs?
Yes. Yes. Human bombs. Also, I like the fact that the person's called the only funny German. That's also funny. That's actually humorous. Oh, the good old Inflation Reduction Act. Anyway, we're going to go with the Battle of Kursk. Fuck it. Let's go. So we do bad tanky stuff for the first half, and then the second half is good tanky stuff, I guess. It's Soviet Storm. It's a series about the Eastern Front during the Second World War, where they defeated the Nazis. Like that one that fell off the mountain that we did at the start. You see? Is there a car 911? I honestly, I am not up to date with Carl's law. I know about the cussy, and that's about it, to be honest. Summer 1943. After 2 years of war, Hitler is no closer to victory in the East and suffered a devastating defeat at Stalingrad. Can we get some dubs in chat? Now the Germans have gathered their strength for one last massive offensive which will decide the outcome of the war.
At first...
Yeah, the Battle of Kursk, incredible battle. The largest tank battle in human history. Also, the largest aerial battle of the Eastern Theatre of the Second World War as well. But that goes kind of unnoticed because of all the tanks.
The Soviets called it the Elephant because of a drawing on its turret. But soon they learned its real name, the Tiger. They'd captured one near Leningrad and brought it to a tank testing facility for trials. The results were alarming. The Tiger's front armor was impervious to a Soviet T-34, even at a range of just 200 meters. Only heavy howitzers could destroy this beast. But that was on a firing...
Are the Germans on retreat? Yes, the Germans are now retreating. We're after Stalingrad, we're after the Battle of the Caucasus, they're being pushed back in the south. They're still pressing around Moscow, although basically it's stalled there, and there's still the siege of Leningrad is still underway. In fact, the siege of Leningrad ends quite late in the war, really, considering how far they'd pushed them out in the east, in the south of that theatre. But yes, they are on the retreat through the Caucasus into southern Ukraine. I mean, literally, the next episode is called "The Liberation of Ukraine." Yeah.
Range. At a gloomy meeting of the Stavka High Command, Marshal of Artillery Nikolai Voronov told Stalin, "We have no guns able to successfully fight against..."
True, but like, where the fuck is your chin, mate? Where is your chin, sir? You appear to have a face and a neck, and nothing in between. What is that about? I mean, good job on the beating the Nazis thing, but like the chin it's worrying.
These tanks.
It's disconcerting.
It was April 1943. Along the entire front, the Red Army prepared to meet what they called the Summer Germans. In both the previous summers, the Wehrmacht's blitzkrieg had proved almost unstoppable. Now, these new German tanks caused fresh concern. Would the Red Army once more be swept aside by the German summer offensive? Soviet engineers worked frantically on new tank and anti-tank gun designs. Few would be ready in time. Meanwhile, the Stavka made plans to meet the inevitable German offensive. all eyes were drawn to the city of Kursk. Here, the Red Army's central front occupied a large bulge, or salient, in the front line. It was...
I do like a large bulge. I'm just going to leave that there.
An obvious place to attack. The Soviet General Staff expected the Germans to attack simultaneously from north and south to cut off the troops inside the salient. To meet this threat, the Red Army began to construct several defensive lines within the salient. The Stavka planned to let the Germans wear themselves out, attacking these defenses, before launching their own counteroffensive. Soviet intelligence was soon able to confirm the Stavka's intuition. On the 12th of April 1943, Stalin was handed secret German plans for Operation Citadel. It was the code name for the Wehrmacht's summer offensive in the east. The information came from an agent codenamed Werther. His real identity remains a mystery, but it's assumed he was an officer within OKW, the German Armed Forces High Command. His reports were...
Oh yeah, the Soviet spies riddled the German lines, yeah. It's just that he was always incredibly suspicious all the fucking time. He was told before the actual invasion that it was going to happen, and he didn't fucking believe them. Stalin was a fucking div.
Were sent to Moscow via Rudolf Rösler, who headed the Lucy spy ring based in Switzerland. The plans for Operation Citadel exactly confirmed what the Stavka had already guessed. The Germans planned to pinch out the Kursk salient with two simultaneous attacks.
Don't pinch a bulge. That's not nice.
They will be made by von Kluge's Army Group Center from the north and by Manstein's Army Group South in the south. At the beginning of May, the Stavka was able to warn its commanders that, according to our intelligence, the enemy plans to attack along the Oriel-Kursk line, the Belgrade-Oboyan line, or along both lines simultaneously. In May, Hitler held a planning meeting to discuss the early phases of Operation Citadel. However, many generals voiced concern. Field Marshal von Kluge, commanding Army Group Center, openly opposed the Führer. General Model, meanwhile, presented air reconnaissance photos. It was his 9th Army that was to assault the Kursk salient from the north. Model pointed to the signs of heavy Soviet defenses being prepared in this sector. Walter Model would earn the nickname the Führer's fireman, because later in the war he was frequently sent by Hitler to try and salvage desperate situations. Model was a fervent Nazi, renowned for his loyalty to the Führer. In 1945, when his army group was encircled by the Americans, he shot himself rather than face...
Lol. Can we get some dubs in chat? Absolutely epic. Lovely. Lovely stuff.
Surrender.
That is the kind of anti-fascist action we need more of.
Model was one of a very small number of generals whose opinion the Führer respected. Model was known as a genius of defense, but he and his 9th Army had less experience of large-scale offensive actions. Some thought that Model was trying to get the entire operation cancelled, allowing him to fight a defensive battle against the Red Army.
He was a model Nazi. Ew.
Guderian was another who expressed doubts about Operation Citadel. As Inspector General of Armoured Troops, he knew that the panzer divisions were not ready for such a massive operation. For him, the whole thing was too much of a risk. The war had already taken a massive toll on the Wehrmacht. If Citadel was a success, it would allow them to retain the initiative on the Eastern Front. But if it failed, it would be disastrous. The Führer agreed to postpone the operation by 1 month, declaring, "There can be no failure."
Spoiler alert. They can.
The delay would allow the Germans to deploy more of their latest armoured vehicles. These included the heavy Tiger tanks, the new Panzer V Panthers, and the...
Oh, has the stream been suspended? I'm fucking God, I hate the world. Street. Okay. Okay, I'm gonna have to shut it off on YouTube. Apologies. Okay, hang on 1 minute. Gonna have to switch over to Twitch. Where's the? Let me just do. Bing bong. Oh, why would Historian was ahead of me? There you go. Boom. Yeah, good night, YouTubes. I need to go on to. Hang on. Boom.